The billionaire saw the little girl's drawing. His shocking reaction left everyone speechless, face screaming in fear. Nobody saw this coming. Not the guests arriving in an hour. Not the caterers polishing crystal glasses in the kitchen. Not even Ethan Cole, the 28-year-old billionaire who built an empire out of nothing, but especially not the 3-year-old girl sitting alone on his marble patio, crayons scattered around her, drawing something that would change his life forever. He walked outside ready to have her removed. He walked back inside a different man. And what happened between those two moments? That's the story nobody expected, and once you hear it, you'll never look at a simple crayon drawing the same way again. Hey everyone, welcome back. Before we dive in, drop a comment and tell me which country you're watching from today. I love seeing how far this little community reaches. Today's story is one of those quiet, heart-tugging ones about wealth, loneliness, and a little girl who saw something in a stranger that he couldn't even see in himself. It's emotional, it's real, and I promise you the ending will stay with you long after it's over. Stick around till the end, because this one builds slowly, and it hits hard. The ocean looked too calm for a day this tense. Ethan Cole stood at the edge of his Malibu estate, phone pressed to his ear, watching the sun sink lower over the Pacific while a dozen people rushed around behind him preparing for the biggest night of the year. The night he would announce his engagement to Vanessa Sterling in front of 300 of the wealthiest people in California. Table 6 needs to be moved, he said flatly into the phone. I don't care whose sponsorship it is. Fix it. He hung up before whoever was on the other end could respond. That was how Ethan handled most things now, decisively, coldly, efficiently. It was how he turned a small property investment firm into a real estate and technology empire worth more than some small countries. It was also, if he was honest with himself in the rare quiet moments he allowed, how he'd ended up alone at 28 with a fiancée he wasn't sure he loved and a house full of staff who were more afraid of him than fond of him. He walked along the stone path toward the west patio, the one that overlooked the water, the one that needed to be perfect for tonight's toast. That was when he saw her. A little girl, maybe 3 years old, sat cross-legged on the marble, an explosion of red and yellow and green crayons scattered around her like fallen leaves. Her dark curls were pulled into a small bun with a red bow, and her tiny hands moved with fierce concentration over a sheet of paper, tongue poking out slightly the way children do when they're trying very hard to get something exactly right. Ethan stopped walking. "Excuse me," he said, his voice sharper than he intended. "Who let a child onto this patio?" The girl didn't even look up. She was too absorbed in her drawing, humming something tuneless under her breath. Footsteps came hurrying from the side entrance, quick, panicked steps. A woman in a gray housekeeping uniform rounded the corner, her face already pale with dread before she'd even seen what was happening. Maria Delgado had worked for the Cole estate for 8 months, ever since a placement agency had sent her over after her last job fell through. She was 31, a single mother, and she needed this job more than Ethan Cole would ever understand. "Mr. Cole, I am so sorry," Maria said, breathless, already crouching to scoop up the crayons. "My sitter canceled an hour ago. I had no one else. I only meant to keep her in the staff room. I promise she wasn't supposed to." "This is a 200-person event in less than an hour," Ethan cut in, his jaw tight. "I don't have room for—" He stopped. His eyes had drifted, almost against his will, down to the paper the little girl was still clutching protectively to her chest now that the adults were talking over her head. Something about it caught him. Not the drawing itself, he could only see the back of the paper, blank white cardstock, but the way the child held it. Carefully. Like it mattered more than anything else in the world. "Lily, baby, give mommy the paper. We have to go," Maria said gently, though her hands were shaking. "No," Lily said, hugging it tighter. "It's not done. It's for the nice man." Maria froze. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "What nice man?" he asked, before he could stop himself. Lily finally looked up. Her eyes, dark brown, enormous, utterly unbothered by the fact that a stranger in an expensive suit was towering over her, studied Ethan's face for a long moment. "You," she said simply, and went right back to coloring. Ethan blinked. "Me?" She saw you yesterday, sir, Maria said quickly, mortified. Through the kitchen window. You said good morning to the gardener, and she just latched onto it. She talks about everyone who's kind to people. I'm so sorry. She doesn't understand boundaries yet. I'll take her inside right now. It won't happen again. Please, I need this job. Maria. Ethan's voice wasn't gentle, exactly, but it wasn't the icy tone from 30 seconds ago either. Stop apologizing. Maria stopped, startled into silence. Behind them, the patio doors opened, and Vanessa Sterling stepped out in a floor-length emerald gown, sunglasses pushed up into perfectly styled blonde hair, phone already in hand. Ethan, darling, the florist is asking about this. She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes landing on the scene in front of her. The crayons, the toddler, the housekeeper on her knees. Her expression shifted instantly, smoothly, into something cool and disapproving. Oh, what is this? It wasn't a question. It was a judgment. Lily, oblivious to the tension crackling in the air around her, held her drawing up toward Ethan with both hands, beaming with the pure, unguarded pride only a 3-year-old can have. I finished it, she announced. Do you want to see? Ethan looked at Vanessa. He looked at Maria, frozen in fear on her knees. And then, almost involuntarily, he looked down at the little girl holding out her whole heart on a piece of paper. He didn't know it yet, but the next 10 seconds were about to undo 20 years of the man he'd built himself into. Yes, he said quietly. I want to see. He crouched down, and the crayon-covered piece of paper changed hands. What was drawn on it made the billionaire's breath catch in his throat. The drawing was simple, the way only a 3-year-old's drawing can be. A big yellow house with a red door. A bright, lopsided sun in the corner, its rays scribbled in every direction like it couldn't be contained. Green grass at the bottom, a wobbly brown dog, and 3 stick figures holding hands in front of the house, a tall one, a medium one, and a small one with a red bow on her head, exactly like the one Lily wore now. At first glance, it was nothing. A child's drawing. The kind that ends up on refrigerators and gets forgotten within a week. But Ethan Cole wasn't looking at it like a stranger would. He was looking at a red door. His chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with the gala, the guests, or the woman standing behind him in an emerald gown waiting for an explanation. A red door. A yellow house. A dog that didn't exist in this child's actual life. Maria had never mentioned a dog, and this house, the Cole estate, was white stone and glass, nothing like the crayon drawing at all. But it looked exactly, achingly, impossibly like a house Ethan hadn't thought about in almost 20 years. Where did you see this house? He asked, and his voice came out rougher than he meant it to. Lily tilted her head, confused by the question. I didn't see it. I made it up. It's your house. My house doesn't look like this. Not this one, Lily said, matter of fact. The way small children explain things adults are too slow to understand. Your real house. The one you had before. Maria's face went white. Lily, honey, that doesn't make sense. Mr. Cole's house is right. It's okay, Ethan said, cutting her off, his eyes still locked on the paper. His hands had gone very still. Let her talk. Because he knew, somehow, with a certainty he couldn't explain, exactly which house she meant. 22 years ago, before Cole Enterprises, before the Malibu estate, before any of it, there had been a small rented house on the edge of a town nobody outside of it had ever heard of. Yellow paint peeling at the corners. A red door his mother had painted herself with money they didn't really have, because she said a red door made a house feel like somebody loved it. A dog named Biscuit that had wandered into their yard one winter and never left. Ethan hadn't spoken about that house to a single living soul in almost 2 decades. Not to his business partners. Not to his college roommates. Not even to Vanessa, who was standing 3 feet away right now with her arms crossed, waiting for him to stand up and rejoin the world of caterers and champagne towers. How do you know about the red door? Ethan said quietly. It wasn't really a question anymore. It was closer to a demand aimed at the universe. I don't know, Lily said with a shrug so careless it almost broke something in his chest. I just drew what felt right. Mommy says I draw feelings sometimes, not just things I see. Silence stretched across the patio. Somewhere behind them, a member of the event staff was calling out something about seating charts, completely unaware that the man they all worked for was currently kneeling on marble, holding a child's crayon drawing like it was the deed to something he'd lost a long time ago. Ethan. Vanessa's voice sliced through the moment, impatient now. We really don't have time for this. The Whitmores will be here in 40 minutes, and you still haven't looked at the seating arrangement. Ethan didn't move. Give me a second, he said. We don't have a second. We have 40 minutes and a photographer arriving at. Vanessa. His tone made her stop. It wasn't loud. It was just final. A second. Maria, still kneeling beside her daughter, watched the exchange with the kind of careful stillness of someone who understood that whatever was happening right now was bigger than a scheduling conflict, even if she didn't fully understand what it was. She'd seen Ethan Cole be cold. She'd seen him be short-tempered, distracted, occasionally even kind in small, quiet, unexpected ways. The time he'd told the new gardener to take the afternoon off during a heat wave. The time he'd covered a caterer's medical bill without ever mentioning it to anyone. But she had never seen him look like this. Unmoored. Younger, somehow, than the man who ran board meetings like military operations. My mother used to say the same thing, Ethan said finally, so quietly it was almost to himself. That a red door makes a house feel loved. Lily nodded solemnly, as if this confirmed something she'd already known. Where is she? The little girl asked. Your mommy. And there it was. The question nobody at Cole Enterprises would ever have dared to ask him, delivered without hesitation by a 3-year-old sitting on his patio in a puddle of crayons. Ethan looked down at the drawing again. At the small stick figure with the red bow. At the tall one beside her, holding her hand. She passed away, he said. A long time ago. Oh. Lily considered this with the serious weight small children give to things they don't fully understand yet, but can tell matter. Then she reached out and gently patted his hand, the way you might comfort a friend on the playground who'd scraped their knee. That's okay. I'll be your friend instead. Behind him, Ethan heard Vanessa exhale sharply through her nose. Not sympathy, not warmth, just irritation dressed up as patience. This is genuinely sweet, she said, in a tone that suggested she found it anything but Ethan, you cannot be photographed tonight looking like you've been crying over a coloring page. Can someone please take the child back to the staff quarters? The word child came out of her mouth like something distasteful. Maria flinched and immediately reached for Lily's hand. Of course, ma'am. I'll take her right now. I'm so sorry for the disruption. Wait. Ethan stood up, the drawing still in his hand, and for the first time all evening, he looked directly at Vanessa instead of past her. Something in his expression had shifted, subtle but unmistakable, like a door quietly closing somewhere inside him. She's not a disruption. Ethan, I didn't mean. I know exactly what you meant. The words landed heavier than either of them expected, and for a moment, out on that patio with the ocean glowing orange behind them and the gala closing in like a countdown clock, something that had been slowly cracking for months finally showed its first visible fracture. Nobody on that patio knew it yet, but the real story, the one underneath the party, the drawing, the red door, was only just beginning. The gala went on, because galas always do. 300 guests arrived in a steady stream of black tie elegance, champagne flowed, a string quartet played something tasteful near the ballroom entrance, and Ethan Cole stood beside Vanessa Sterling shaking hands and accepting congratulations he barely registered. His mind somewhere else entirely, on a patio, on a red door, on a small hand patting his own like it could fix 20 years of grief in a single gesture. He'd asked Maria to keep Lily in the staff residence for the rest of the evening, not out of embarrassment, but because he genuinely didn't want the chaos of the event anywhere near her. It was, he realized with some discomfort, the first time in longer than he could remember that he'd made a decision based on someone's well-being rather than optics. Vanessa noticed. Vanessa noticed everything when it suited her. You've been distracted all night, she said quietly, smiling for the cameras even as she spoke through her teeth. People are starting to ask if everything's all right. Everything's fine. Is it about the maid's daughter? The way she said the maid's daughter, flat, dismissive, like Lily was a minor scheduling inconvenience rather than a person, made something in Ethan's stomach turn. Her name is Lily, he said. Vanessa's smile didn't waver, but her eyes went cool. Of course. Lily. She sipped her champagne. Look, I understand it was a strange little moment. Kids say odd things, they have big imaginations. It's charming, truly. But you can't let it rattle you like this in front of the Whitmores and half the board. It's not about the board. Then what is it about? Ethan didn't answer right away. Across the ballroom, through the wide glass doors, he could just make out the staff corridor light in the distance, a small yellow glow against the dark. Somewhere back there, Lily was probably asleep on a cot, that drawing likely still clutched in her small hands, or tucked somewhere safe by her mother. I need to talk to Maria, he said. After this. About what, exactly? About her daughter. About the drawing. Vanessa's laugh was short, sharp, and entirely without humor. Ethan. It's a coloring page. You're acting like a toddler handed you a signed contract. You don't understand. Then explain it to me. He almost did. He almost told her about the yellow house, about the red door his mother painted with her own hands the summer before the bank took it from them, about Biscuit the dog, about the years afterward in foster placements and then group homes, about the version of himself that had clawed his way out of poverty so thoroughly that he'd buried every trace of where he came from under quarterly earnings reports and acquisition deals. He almost told his fiancée, the woman he was supposed to marry in the spring, the one piece of himself he'd never told anyone. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the way she was already glancing past him toward a senator's wife she needed to greet. Maybe it was 3 years of a relationship built more on strategic partnership than genuine intimacy finally showing him its true shape all at once. Never mind, he said instead. Good. She squeezed his arm, already turning away. Smile, darling. The Whitmores are coming over. Later that night, long after the last car had pulled out of the circular driveway and the catering staff had finished breaking down the tables, Ethan walked the quiet halls toward the staff residence wing, a part of his own house he realized, with some shame, he had never once set foot in. He found Maria in the small kitchen there, still in her uniform, exhausted, cleaning up after putting Lily to bed. She startled when she saw him in the doorway. Mr. Cole, is something wrong? Did I forget something for the... No. He held up a hand. Nothing's wrong. Can we talk? For a minute. Maria's eyes flicked toward the hallway, toward the closed door where her daughter slept, the way a mother's eyes always do when a powerful man wants to talk to her late at night about something unclear. Of course, sir. Please don't call me sir. Not right now. She nodded slowly, uncertain, and gestured for him to sit at the small table. He did, feeling strangely out of place in the modest room, a billionaire perched on a folding chair in the servants' kitchen of his own mansion. I need to ask you something, Ethan said, and I need you to be honest with me, even if the answer sounds strange. Okay. Has Lily ever met someone from my past? A relative, an old employee, anyone who might have told her stories about. He stopped, unsure how to even phrase it. About a house I grew up in. A yellow house with a red door. Maria shook her head slowly, genuinely confused. No, sir, Ethan. I promise you she's 3. She's never left California. She doesn't know anything about your life before this job, and, honestly, neither do I. We don't gossip about the family, if that's what you're asking. I believe you. And he did. That was what made it so unsettling. It's just that drawing. It was my childhood home. Down to the color of the door. Maria's expression softened into something gentler, something that looked almost like recognition. Lily's always been like that, she said quietly. Since she was barely 2. She draws things she couldn't possibly know. My mother used to say she has an old soul. I used to think it was just a sweet thing people say about kids. She hesitated. But sometimes I wonder if she just notices things the rest of us miss. Feelings under the surface. People's sadness, even when they hide it well. Ethan looked down at his hands. I haven't talked about my mother in almost 20 years, he admitted, so quietly it barely carried across the small table. Not to anyone. Not even to Vanessa. Maria didn't say anything right away. She simply refilled his water glass, sat down across from him, and waited, the way people who have spent their lives caring for others instinctively know how to do, giving space instead of filling it. "You don't have to explain anything to me," she finally said. "But if it helps to talk, I'm a good listener. Comes with the job." And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Ethan Cole, billionaire, self-made empire builder, a man 3 months from marrying a woman he wasn't sure he loved, found himself talking. Really talking. About the yellow house. About his mother's hands, stained with red paint. About the years after she died, when an 8-year-old boy learned that the world doesn't wait for you to grieve before it demands you get back up. He didn't notice until much later that night that somewhere in that conversation, everything had started to change. Nobody saw the shift happening in real time, not even Ethan himself, not at first. But over the following weeks, something in the rhythm of the house had quietly, undeniably changed. He started coming home earlier. It began small. A meeting that used to run until 9 somehow ended by 6. A dinner with investors got rescheduled instead of extended. He told himself it was because the merger with Hartwell Group was finally slowing down, that things were simply less demanding right now. But even Ethan, a man who prided himself on brutal self-honesty in every boardroom, knew he was lying to himself a little. The truth was simpler than any spreadsheet could capture. He wanted to be there when Lily got home from preschool. It had started with small things. Passing her in the hallway and asking about her day. Noticing, one evening, that she was drawing again at the kitchen table while Maria finished the last of her shift, and sitting down across from her without really deciding to. She'd slid a blank paper and a purple crayon toward him without a word, as if it was simply understood that he'd want to draw too. "What are we making?" he'd asked, feeling faintly ridiculous holding a crayon in a hand that usually held a fountain pen worth more than most people's monthly rent. "Whatever you feel like," Lily said, already absorbed in her own paper. That's the rule. He'd drawn a house. Not the yellow one with the red door. That one lived somewhere private now, folded carefully and kept in the drawer of his office desk, where no assistant would ever find it, but a new house. Bigger. With a dog in the yard. Maria, watching from the doorway with a dish towel still in her hands, had felt something in her chest tighten at the sight of it. The most powerful man she'd ever worked for, sitting cross-legged at a child-sized table, carefully coloring inside the lines beside her daughter. Vanessa noticed too. Of course she did. "You had drinks scheduled with the Kessler group tonight," she said one evening, finding Ethan in the kitchen instead of his office, sleeves rolled up, laughing at something Lily had said about her stuffed rabbit having a job as an important business rabbit. "I moved it." "You moved it? For this?" Ethan looked up. "For what exactly?" Vanessa's eyes flicked toward Maria, who had gone very still by the sink, and toward Lily, who was oblivious, still narrating her rabbit's very demanding schedule. "For playing house with the helps kid, Ethan. People are starting to talk. Do you understand how this looks? The Kessler deal is worth $200 million and you're finger painting." "It's crayons," Ethan said flatly. "Not finger paint. That's not the point, and you know it." Maria quietly began gathering the crayons, murmuring something about it being close to Lily's bedtime, trying to make herself and her daughter as small and invisible as possible the way years of working in other people's houses had trained her to do during moments like this. "Leave the crayons," Ethan said, not unkindly, but firm. "She's not finished." Maria froze, uncertain who to listen to. Vanessa's jaw tightened. "Can I speak to you privately?" she said to Ethan. It wasn't a question. They stepped into the hallway, but the kitchen wasn't far enough for the walls to fully contain a voice trained for boardrooms. "This has gone far enough," Vanessa said, low and clipped. "First it was one conversation on the patio, fine, sweet, whatever. Now you're rearranging a $200 million deal to color with a toddler in the kitchen every night. What is actually going on with you?" "I like spending time with her. Both of them, actually." "Ethan, she is your housekeeper. She has a name." "I know her name," Vanessa snapped. "That's not what I mean, and you know it. In 4 months, we are getting married in front of everyone who matters in this industry. I need you focused. I need you presentable. I need the version of you that built this company, not whatever the soft, distracted thing is that you've turned into since some kid drew a house. Something cold settled over Ethan's face. The version of me that built this company, he said slowly, was a scared 8-year-old boy who lost his mother and taught himself that the only way to survive was to never need anyone or anything again. I spent 20 years being exactly that person. And for the first time since she died, I don't feel completely hollow inside, and you want me to go back to being hollow because it's more convenient for a merger. Vanessa stared at him, momentarily silenced. That's not what I think it is, actually. He rubbed his face, suddenly exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. I think you like the version of me that never asked for anything, never needed anything, never slowed down long enough to feel anything. Because that version was easy to manage, easy to plan a wedding around, easy to build a brand alongside. That's unfair. Maybe. His voice softened, but not the words. But I don't think it's wrong. Vanessa's eyes narrowed, something calculating flickering behind them, gone almost as fast as it appeared. Fine, she said finally, smoothing her expression back into something composed. Have your moment. Play house. But Ethan, this arrangement, whatever it's turning into, it has an expiration date. One way or another. She walked away before he could respond, heels clicking sharply down the marble hallway. Ethan stood there for a long moment before walking back into the kitchen, where Lily immediately held up her drawing, a lopsided purple house now with 2 dogs instead of 1, because one dog gets lonely, completely unaware that somewhere down the hall, a threat had just quietly been made. He didn't know yet exactly what Vanessa meant by one way or another. But he would find out sooner than he expected, and it would come from a direction he never saw coming. The trouble started 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday, while Ethan was in Chicago closing the Hartwell acquisition. Maria arrived for her usual morning shift to find a woman from HR waiting for her in the staff office, not the friendly assistant manager she normally dealt with, but someone from corporate she'd never seen before, holding a clipboard with an expression that made Maria's stomach drop before a single word was spoken. Maria Delgado? Yes. I'm afraid there's been a restructuring of household staffing. Effective today, your position has been eliminated. The words landed like a physical blow. Maria gripped the doorframe. Eliminated? I don't understand. I've been here 8 months. My reviews have all been. I understand this is difficult, the woman said, in a tone that suggested she understood nothing of the sort. You'll receive 2 weeks' severance. Your belongings can be collected from the staff quarters by 5 o'clock today. Does Mr. Cole know about this? The woman hesitated for just a fraction of a second too long. This decision came through Ms. Sterling's office as part of preparations for the wedding transition. All household matters are being consolidated under her authority for the time being. Maria felt the floor tilt beneath her. She thought of Lily, currently at preschool, blissfully unaware that in a few hours she'd have no home to go back to that evening because the staff residence, the only stable housing Maria had managed to secure since her divorce, came with the job. No job meant no residence. No residence meant, within days, nowhere for either of them to go. Please, Maria said, hating how her voice shook, hating that she had to beg, hating the years of experience that had taught her exactly how useless begging usually was in situations like this. I have a daughter. This is our home. Can I at least speak to Mr. Cole before? Mr. Cole is unreachable until Thursday. I'm sorry. These decisions have already been finalized. By the time Ethan landed back in California 2 days later, jet-lagged and still mentally tallying the numbers from the Hartwell deal, he walked into a house that felt different before he even understood why. The energy was wrong. Too quiet. He found the head of household staff in the main hallway and asked, out of habit more than anything, whether Maria had already put Lily down for the night. The staff member's face went carefully blank in the particular way people's faces go blank when they're about to deliver news they know will not be well received. Sir, Maria was let go on Tuesday. Ms. Sterling authorized the restructuring while you were traveling. Ethan stood completely still. Let go, he repeated. Yes, sir. Her and her daughter vacated the staff quarters 2 days ago. I believe there. The man hesitated. I heard she mention staying at a motel off the highway. Temporarily. Until she finds something. Something in Ethan's chest went cold and very, very sharp. He found Vanessa in the sitting room, going over seating charts for a different event entirely, a bridal shower this time. Swatches of ivory fabric spread across the table in front of her like nothing in the world had shifted at all. You fired her, Ethan said. No greeting. No preamble. Vanessa glanced up, unbothered. I restructured household staffing. It's a common practice before a wedding, Ethan, you streamline the... Don't. His voice cracked through the room like something breaking. Don't dress it up. You fired Maria and put her and her 3-year-old daughter out of their home while I was on a plane and couldn't stop you. I made an executive decision on your behalf because you were too distracted to make it yourself, Vanessa said, standing now, her composure finally slipping into something sharper. This whole situation had become inappropriate, Ethan. A grown man rearranging his empire around playdates with the housekeeper's kid. People talk. The Kesslers already made a comment about it at the gala. I did you a favor. A favor. Yes. Where are they now? I don't know, and I don't particularly care. There are dozens of agencies she can register with, it's not. You knew, Ethan said quietly, and something about the quietness was far more frightening than if he'd shouted. You knew exactly what this would do to them. That they'd lose their housing. That a single mother and a toddler would end up somewhere unsafe. And you did it anyway, while I was unreachable, specifically because I was unreachable. Vanessa's silence was answer enough. I need to find them, Ethan said, already turning toward the door, phone in hand. Ethan, if you walk out that door right now, over this, I think you need to seriously consider what that means about the last 3 years of our relationship. He stopped in the doorway, his hand on the frame, and turned back to look at her, really look at her, the way he hadn't allowed himself to in longer than he wanted to admit. I think, he said slowly, I already know exactly what it means. I think I've known for a while now. I just didn't want to. He walked out before she could respond, dialing Maria's number with hands that weren't quite steady, praying she'd pick up. Maria picked up on the 4th ring, her voice tight and exhausted in a way that made Ethan's chest ache before she'd said more than 2 words. Mr. Cole? Maria, I just got home. I just found out. I am so sorry. Please tell me you're both okay. There was a pause, the sound of a door closing somewhere, a child's voice faint in the background asking a question. We're okay, Maria said carefully. We're at a motel near the highway. It's fine, it's temporary, we'll figure something out. It's not fine. None of this is fine. Ethan was already grabbing his car keys. Send me the address. I'm coming to get you. Sir, I really don't think that's... Please. The word came out rougher than he intended, more urgent. Just, please let me help. This never should have happened. It's my fault for not protecting your position better, and I need to fix it. The address came through a minute later. It was a motel Ethan had driven past 1,000 times without ever really seeing it, the kind of place that existed at the edges of a city built on visible wealth, tucked behind a gas station. The kind of place people ended up when the systems meant to catch them had quietly, invisibly failed. He found room 114 and knocked, and when Maria opened the door, the sight behind her hit him harder than he expected. A single queen bed, a small television bolted to the wall, Lily's crayons spread across a thin motel comforter. A suitcase half-packed in the corner because they hadn't had time to properly settle anywhere. Lily looked up from her drawing and broke into a delighted smile. You found us. I did, Ethan said, crouching down, his throat tight in a way that had nothing to do with the stale motel air. I'm so sorry it took me this long. It's okay. Mommy said you were busy in Chicago. He looked up at Maria, standing in the doorway with her arms crossed protectively over herself, exhaustion carved into every line of her face, and felt something in him that had been building for weeks finally settle into absolute clarity. You're not staying here, he said. Both of you, please come back with me tonight. Mr. Cole, I appreciate it, truly, but I already have a small savings. I can find something within a week we don't need. I'm not asking as your former employer, he said. I'm asking because I care about what happens to both of you, and because what happened was wrong, and Because I have more resources sitting unused than I know what to do with. And there is absolutely no version of tonight where the two of you sleep in a motel while I go back to sleep in a 14-bedroom house alone. Please. Maria studied him for a long moment, the way someone studies a person when they're trying to decide whether kindness is real or just another kind of leverage they haven't identified yet. Years of experience had taught her to be careful around powerful men who suddenly wanted to help. But Lily was already tugging her mother's hand, crayons gathered back into their box. Come on, Mommy. He is good snacks. Something in Maria's guarded expression finally cracked into something like a tired, watery laugh. Okay, she said quietly. Okay, thank you. That night, back at the estate, with Lily finally asleep in one of the many empty guest rooms and Maria settled with a cup of tea in the kitchen she used to clean rather than sit in, Ethan told her the truth about Vanessa's ultimatum. About the engagement that suddenly felt like a business merger rather than a marriage, about the years he'd spent building a life that looked successful from the outside and felt entirely hollow from the inside, until a 3-year-old handed him a crayon drawing of a house he thought he'd buried forever. I don't know exactly what I'm doing, he admitted. I just know I'm done pretending certain things don't matter to me. Maria wrapped both hands around her mug. For what it's worth, she said, Lily's been happier this past month than I've seen her in a long time. She talks about you like, she paused, searching for the right words, like you're someone safe. That's not something she gives easily. Her father left when she was 1. She doesn't trust people quickly. I don't want to be someone who lets her down too. Then don't be, Maria said simply. It really is that straightforward in the end. People overcomplicate it. 3 days later, Ethan called off the engagement. He did it privately, quietly, without a press release or a public statement, because whatever else had gone wrong between them, he didn't believe in turning Vanessa into a headline for other people's entertainment. But the ring went back, the wedding planners were released from their contracts, and the engagement announcement that had defined the gala just weeks earlier was quietly, permanently undone. Vanessa's response was neither graceful nor kind. You're throwing away everything we built, she said, standing in the foyer with her bags already packed, her voice tight with something between fury and disbelief, for a housekeeper and her kid. I'm not throwing anything away, Ethan said quietly. I'm finally being honest about what I actually want. I'm sorry it took me this long to see it clearly. She left that night, and the house, for the first time in years, felt less like it than it ever had, quieter in a way that felt like relief instead of loneliness. The weeks that followed felt, to Ethan, like slowly waking up from a very long sleep. He didn't rush anything. He was careful, deliberately, painstakingly careful, not to let his sudden clarity turn into something reckless or overwhelming for Maria, who had spent years learning to keep her guard up around people with more power than her. He offered her a permanent position managing household operations, at a salary that finally reflected the actual value of the work she'd been doing for years, and he made sure the offer came with a formal contract, drawn up by his own lawyers, so that nothing about it could ever again be undone by a single signature from someone else's office. He offered her and Lily a small guest house on the property, separate from the main residence, with its own kitchen and yard, so that Maria would never again feel like her home existed only at someone else's convenience. You don't have to do all this, Maria told him one afternoon, standing in the doorway of the guest house, watching movers carry in the few boxes of belongings they'd managed to keep. I know I don't have to, Ethan said. I want to. Slowly, cautiously, something began to grow between them that neither of them rushed to name. Dinners that started as simple gestures of gratitude became a standing evening ritual. Conversations that used to be about scheduling and household logistics became conversations about everything, about Maria's own childhood in a small town 2 states away, about the husband who'd left when Lily was barely walking, about dreams she'd quietly set aside while she focused entirely on keeping her daughter fed, housed, and safe. Ethan found himself, for the first time in years, talking about his mother without the old, practiced flatness he'd used to protect himself for 2 decades. He told Maria about the year after she died, about the group home, about the older kid there who'd taught him that vulnerability got you hurt faster than almost anything else, about how he'd carried that lesson like armor straight into a boardroom and never once thought to take it off. I think, he admitted one evening, sitting on the guest house porch while Lily chased fireflies across the yard in the fading light, I built this entire empire trying to prove to a version of myself that doesn't exist anymore that I was worth something. And somehow it took your daughter drawing a house to remind me that I already knew that a long time ago. My mother knew it. I think I just forgot. Maria was quiet for a moment, watching Lily's small silhouette darting through the grass. Grief does that, she said softly. It convinces you that the only way to survive losing someone is to become someone completely different than who they loved. But you don't have to keep proving anything anymore, Ethan. Not to her, not to yourself. He looked over at her, really looked, and felt something settle in his chest that felt less like the sharp, driving ambition that had fueled him for 20 years, and more like something quieter. Steadier. How did you get to be so wise about all this? He asked. Maria laughed softly. Single motherhood is a very fast education in what actually matters. It was around this time that Lily started calling him something new. It happened without ceremony, without anyone deciding it or planning it. She simply started saying it one evening at dinner, in between bites of macaroni, entirely unaware of the weight the word carried for the two adults sitting across from her. Papa Ethan, can I have more juice? The table went briefly silent. Maria's fork paused halfway to her mouth, her eyes flicking anxiously toward Ethan, unsure how he'd react, half ready to gently correct her daughter, to apologize, to explain that it was just a phase, just a child's imagination running ahead of reality. But Ethan was already reaching for the juice, his throat tight, his eyes suspiciously bright. Of course, sweetheart, he said, voice thick. As much as you want. Nobody corrected her that night, or any night after. 6 months after the gala where a toddler's crayon drawing had cracked something open in a man who thought he'd sealed himself shut forever, Ethan Cole stood in the same spot on the patio, watching the same ocean, but everything about the moment felt entirely different. The house was quieter now in the good way. Vanessa's presence, once woven into every corner of the estate's decor and social calendar, had faded into something distant and rarely thought of. In its place was something Ethan hadn't realized he'd been starving for his entire adult life, a home that actually felt lived in. Lily's drawings covered an entire section of the refrigerator now, a rotating gallery that Maria refreshed every few weeks, moving the older ones into a growing folder Ethan kept in his office desk beside the very first one. The yellow house with the red door, still carefully preserved, its edges soft from handling. Cole Enterprises had changed too, in ways that surprised even Ethan's closest colleagues. He'd restructured the household staff policies across all his properties, implementing protections that ensured no employee's housing could ever again be tied so precariously to a single person's whim. He'd quietly funded a scholarship program for children of single parents working in service industries, nothing flashy, no press conference, just a foundation with Maria's input woven into every decision about who it should help and how. You've gotten soft, one of his board members joked at a quarterly meeting, watching Ethan approve a benefits expansion that would have been unthinkable to the man he'd been a year earlier. No, Ethan said, and he meant it completely. I've just remembered what actually made me strong in the first place. It wasn't all smooth, of course. Building something real rarely is. There were adjustment periods, Lily's occasional nightmares about the motel, about instability, about the fear of losing a home again, fears that took patient, consistent reassurance to soften. There were awkward moments where Maria, still cautious after years of hardship, would second-guess whether the life they were building was too good to trust, whether it could all still be taken away by someone else's signature on a form. It won't be, Ethan told her one evening, sitting beside her on the porch steps while Lily slept soundly inside, finally, blessedly, free of nightmares for the first time in weeks. I promise you that. Not because I have money, because I have you both, and that's not something I'm willing to lose again. Maria looked at him for a long moment, something soft and unguarded finally settling into her expression, years of careful walls quietly, gently coming down. "I never expected any of this," she admitted. "8 months ago, I was terrified you'd fire me for letting Lily near your patio." 8 months ago, Ethan said, "I was a man who thought love was a liability." "I'm glad we were both wrong." The proposal, when it came, was nothing like the gala that had once defined Ethan's understanding of what commitment was supposed to look like. There were no 300 guests, no string quartet, no emerald gown or curated seating chart designed to impress a board of directors. Instead, on a quiet Sunday morning nearly a year after the drawing that started everything, Ethan sat on the same patio where it had all begun, a small box in his pocket, watching Lily, now 4, taller, more talkative, still fiercely devoted to her crayons, putting the finishing touches on a new drawing at the same small table. "Can I see?" Ethan asked. Lily held it up proudly. It was the same house from the very first drawing, the yellow one, the red door, except this time, there were 4 stick figures instead of 3. The tall one, the medium one, the small one with the red bow, and a new figure beside them, holding hands with all 3, unmistakably him. "That's us now," Lily said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "A whole family." Maria came out onto the patio just then, carrying 2 mugs of coffee, and stopped short at the sight of Ethan on one knee beside her daughter, the small velvet box open in his hand, his eyes glassy in a way she'd rarely seen from a man who'd once prided himself on never showing anything at all. "Maria," he said, voice rough, "I spent most of my life believing that the only way to survive loss was to make sure I never let myself need anyone again. Your daughter undid that in about 30 seconds with a piece of paper and some crayons, and you finished the job every single day since. I don't want to build an empire that looks impressive from a distance anymore. I want to build a home. With you. With her. For real. This time, not because it looks right for a headline, but because it's the truest thing I've ever wanted." Maria's hands were shaking so badly the coffee nearly spilled. She set the mugs down on the small table, beside the crayons, beside the drawing of their family that a 4-year-old had made look so effortless. "Yes," she said, before he'd even finished asking the actual question, laughing through tears. "Yes, of course, yes." Lily clapped so hard she knocked over an entire cup of orange crayons, entirely unbothered, already announcing to no one in particular that she would be needing a very important flower girl dress. They married in the spring on the same patio where it had all started. No 300 guests this time, just close friends, a handful of trusted staff who had watched the whole story unfold, and Lily, 5 years old now, walking down a short aisle of white flower petals in a dress she had personally approved, scattering rose petals with the intense seriousness of someone who understood this was, without question, the most important job of the day. Ethan stood at the end of that aisle in a simple gray suit, no purple silk, no cameras flashing for a magazine spread, just the ocean behind him and the 2 people who had quietly, completely rebuilt his understanding of what a life well lived actually looked like. During the vows, Ethan turned briefly to Lily, who stood beside her mother clutching a small basket of petals, and knelt down to her height in front of everyone. "I made a promise to your mom today," he said gently, "but I want to make one to you too, if that's okay." Lily nodded solemnly, wide-eyed with the importance of the moment. "I promise," Ethan said, "to always show up. To never let a house feel less loved because I'm too busy or too scared to be in it. And I promise that no matter what happens, you will always, always have a home with a red door." Lily threw her arms around his neck without hesitation, and the small gathered crowd of guests, most of whom had no idea about the yellow house or the red door or the 20 years of grief a crayon drawing had finally unlocked, still felt the weight of the moment settle over them like something sacred. Later that evening, after the small reception had wound down and the guests had gone home, Ethan found the original drawing framed and hanging in the hallway of the guest house. Maria had done it months earlier, without telling him, and he only discovered it that night, wandering the hall with his tie loosened and his heart fuller than he could remember it ever being. He stood in front of it for a long time. The lopsided yellow house. The bright, uncontainable sun. The three stick figures holding hands, now four, added in a slightly different shade of crayon, drawn in months later once the family had actually become real. There's a lesson in the story that's easy to miss beneath the mansion and the gala and the billionaire twist, and it's this: the things that actually heal us rarely arrive the way we expect. They don't come with warnings or grand entrances. Sometimes they come quietly, on a piece of paper, held out by someone too young to know what a broken heart even looks like, offered without hesitation simply because kindness, to a child, doesn't need a reason. Ethan Cole spent 20 years building walls out of success, telling himself that needing no one was the same thing as being strong. It took a 3-year-old with a box of crayons and an open heart to show him they were never the same thing at all. If this story moved you even a little, do me a favor and hit that like button. It genuinely helps this story reach more people who might need it today. Subscribe if you're new here, because we've got so many more stories like this one coming. And if you know someone who could use a reminder that it's never too late to let people in, go ahead and share this with them. Thank you so much for watching until the end. I'll see you in the next story. Yellow Heart.